Hi, I'm Kathleen Lawson, and as a business strategist, I work with female service-based business owners, helping them put the strategy, structure, and routines in place so they can execute on their big goals. And today we are diving into managing and setting client expectations, and I have brought a special guest on today, Holly Henderson. Holly and I have worked together for years, and I'm excited to have her here for this conversation because this is something she is very good at. And Holly, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Kathleen. Hi, I'm Holly. I'm a virtual business manager and founder of Anchor Administration. I support online business owners at a high level with marketing system, admin support, and operations. I have over 4 years of experience with a background in marketing, and I help you streamline your back end of your business to reduce overwhelm and keep things moving so you can focus on what you do best.
Awesome. So Holly's been working with me in my business on all the things she said: marketing, client support, administration. And one of the things that I've noticed is how intentional that you are on your client expectations. And so when I was working on the content for this month and knowing I wanted to talk about this, I was like, oh, I've got to talk to Holly about this because this is something that's clear that you've thought about this and it's very deliberate in your interaction. So why don't we start there? Like, why do you think it's important to be really intentional about managing your client expectations?
Yes, I think it's all about the relationship if it boils down to one main point. Just because obviously when I first started, I wasn't aware of how crucial it was. So as you are interacting with clients and building relationships with them, you realize it's not so much about the expectation as it is just the communication around it. So I used to just I don't want to cause any friction in the relationship between me and I have hurt feelings or the client has hurt feelings, because it creates a really not a good work environment together. So that's sort of why I focus on it. I would say early on, I was kind of maybe more rigid and be like, this is, how I do things, but also over time, I've kind of learned it's more about a two-way conversation as you're kind of starting to work together or planning to work together, having open and honest communication about what is expected, what your needs are, how you work, just so you can make sure that when you're working together, it's an aligned partnership and not something that will just create friction.
Right. It's funny. I think like in the beginning too, when someone's a new business owner, it's very similar to like the boundaries issue. People are afraid to set those kinds of expectations or boundaries, and they feel same with their calendar. It's like, when you're brand new, it's like, oh, I'm available all the time, anytime. And, people are afraid to set boundaries. And I think this is a similar thing, that people are kind of afraid to set that expectation and be really clear about those kinds of things. And, as you said, like, as you get more experience and you start to understand that it's good for both sides. As you said, you want the relationship to work well. And so it's good for both sides. And I think you get a little braver in your interactions. And so that you're able to set those a little bit, set those better. All right. So let's start from the beginning. So I think when you're starting to work with somebody, proposal scope, like how do you use your proposal to help set the expectations?
Yeah, so it even begins before the proposal. I usually kind of discuss how I work with someone in the discovery call, just to make it very clear, like, this is generally how it works. And we can talk about how you like to work and see if we can kind of come up with something that's a good medium for everyone. But I think it just begins there, being very clear. And then in the proposal, I also have outlines as to, these are my office hours. This is like a general turnaround time for certain projects. Here's how you can reach me and when. So it just sort of is very clear in that document. So as they're reading through, that they're aware of generally how things work. And we've already had the discussion on the discovery call too.
Right. And I think when we were talking about this call, we were also saying that maybe even a step prior to that is making sure that that when you take on a client, that it's somebody that, you watch for those red flags, and you want to make sure that they're the right kind of fit for you, which I think is the first step towards making sure that you're going to have this good relationship.
Yeah, exactly. Because if they're more of a they do everything last minute because they're just very creative and they're not open to any kind of structure, or, they're just very like fly by the seat of their pants and they want you to do the same thing. Immediately for me, that's just not something I can do.
That's not going to work for you.
So, but it might for some other people, but I think it's just good to be aware of, those types of things before you even begin to work together.
Right. So that kind of speaks to a certain level of self-awareness and knowing your red flags. And I think that's definitely important. Okay. So then we've got clear proposal, clear scope, as well as sort of this general discussion about this is how things are going to go. So they know like, this is the path we're going to take. These are the things we're going to do. And this is how it's going to work. And then you started to get into some specifics around like hours and turnaround times and things like that. So how do you manage that? Because I mean, you're juggling different clients, different needs. Sometimes somebody's going to have emergencies. So how do you kind of balance that?
So for me, like personally balancing it, I use obviously a project management system to kind of keep track of what I need to do in every day. So I can always have a clear picture of what is expected of me from everyone as I go into a day. And then from there, I sort of tackle things by priority. So that way, if something more urgent does come up, I'm able to respond quickly. And I also am able to keep my turnaround times reasonable and relatively fast. But I would say if it's, 5 o'clock on a Friday and all of a sudden someone just decides that they want something and it's not like a life or death situation, I would very politely say, I will have that to you, in the first couple of days of next week. And we can kind of communicate around that if that works for them and whatever. But I think it's more important that the communication is there. And like I said, I have the back end system to support, on Wednesday, you've decided that, your event tomorrow we forgot something. Okay, well, I can respond to that because I've structured my day that allows me to kind of respond efficiently to it.
Right. So a couple of things around that I've noticed specifically. One is transparency. And I think that's important because I can remember like many occasions when you've got two small daughters, young daughters. And like, I can remember many times that you've said, oh, this one's sick or, is out of school this week or, it's vacation week or whatever. So you kind of are very transparent about what's going on and how things might impact turnaround time. So I think that's an important piece too. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I do. Like it is again about the communication. So if I unexpectedly am going to be taking some time because someone is sick or doctors or whatever, I just communicate that and say on Voxer usually, someone's sick today. And so I might not get to XYZ, or, if you come up with something extra, it may not happen today, but I'll do my best. And most people are very, very understanding about that because we're all humans. We're all living our life. People knows what it's like to come up with something that you didn't expect. So,
well, and as you point out, it's about the communication around it. Yeah. And the other kind of piece of that is the repetition around the communication. And the very particular point I wanted to bring up was around like days off. So you live in Canada. I'm in the US, we have different holidays. And so they don't always align. And, you're sometimes, the days, well, plus you have other days off that you take as well. But one of the things is that you always send several messages in the days leading up to that. Like, oh, a couple months out, like, hey, these are my days off over the next few months. And then as we get closer, don't forget. And then like that week, so there's like several touch points around that. So I love that. And I think that just goes to the point that like you can't over communicate something. And I think that's really important around this whole topic.
Yeah, absolutely. It took some time for me to get comfortable with that one because sometimes, especially at first, if you're a new business owner, you feel a little guilty about taking days off or even being like, I'm off this day. Can be kind of hard, but I definitely have normalized being very repetitive. And that was a learning experience because at first I was just I told you once, or maybe I was on a phone call and then someone would forget and then they'd be upset and they'd be like, oh, well, I thought you were working today. And then I'd be like, sorry, I'm not. And then it just kind of created, again, unnecessary friction.
Right.
So now I block out usually a few months in advance and I send a note like on an email, like these are the days I'm off for the coming couple of months. And I'll let you know a little closer to the date as well, just as a reminder. And that kind of repetitive repeating my availability, it it's not annoying. It definitely just creates like a respectful professional, like people trust that
Yeah.
I'm available when I'm available, when I'm not, and everybody's very clear and nobody's expecting me to be there when I'm not.
Right. And like you said, gives them a kind of a second chance to get that on their calendar if they've missed it.
Mhm.
So a minute ago, you mentioned Voxer and you also use Slack. So I'm curious about why you chose Slack for your communication with your clients.
Sure. So I usually use a combination of Slack and Voxer, and I generally find they're very collaborative. And I also find emails, while sometimes unavoidable, kind of annoying because we're bombarded in our inboxes with so many different things. And I think it's easy for those things to slip through the cracks.
Mhm.
It kind of keeps it out of the email chaos. And it also works well for just daily kind of check-ins and communication. And especially Voxer, it's, voice-based. So it's very more casual, more personal. And you can just kind of like brainstorm, or it's easy if you're on the go and something just needs to be quickly said. And Slack is great if you're sending, files and things. Again, you can keep it out of your inbox and you can always go back up through the thread and just check on what was said, what was done. And so for those reasons, I think it's just really like flexible communication, which is why I like them.
Yeah, I agree with you on all that. And I do love how it's only our communication. Like I'm not weeding through,
Right.
a million emails. And like you said, you can go back and, follow a conversation. The other thing I like, and I use Voxer with my clients as well. And one of the other things I like about Voxer is that if you've got something that's a little more tricky to explain, it's easier to speak it versus trying to type it. And I also like that you can hear tone and voice. So if, you know, like, yeah, I mean, which is very helpful and helps with clear communication because now you're hearing them. You're not potentially misreading a text or something.
Yeah, exactly. Because how many times have we all done that where we're like, oh my gosh, they're mad at me, and nobody is mad.
Nobody's mad. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so so here's something that doesn't really, I don't think comes into play too much with you, but it would for other business owners. And that is for really like large projects, like a status report, or maybe you do with some of your other clients. I know with you and I, we don't really have too many things that are so big that it's like we have to do regular check-ins. But I was thinking about people that do like web design or large projects that, that take a really, really long time. And I'm a big fan of a regular status report or check-in on something. And that gives the client information about, here's where we are right now. Here's what's coming up. Here's the, projected timeline. So do you ever run into that, or do you use anything like that with other clients, or?
I would say because I'm in regular communication with clients mostly every day, either through Slack or Voxer, and I also do biweekly Zoom calls, we kind of run through a lot of that stuff that way. So I don't have to send anything generally unless it is a larger project. But I think, again, it's the communication about it, because if you're just leaving clients in the dark, especially if you're not having that regular day-to-day communication, because maybe it is a project and you guys just don't have that sort of rapport, then people who are in the dark often feel like, well, is it getting done? Like, where is it? I'm nervous. So it is important to have those regular touch points, even if it's not, you're not a Voxer or a Zoom, it's an email like, this is where this is at. This is when it's expected to be done. Just because that way it erases the need for the friction of, are they doing anything? I'm not sure. Like it just kind of takes away all of that.
Yeah. And so your version of that would be like you said, the biweekly meeting. And I love that too. And I think anybody that's working on a retainer basis with a client, I think a regular meeting like that really helps head off any potential problems. And also I think it eliminates questions in the day-to-day, because you're able to kind of talk about these things and make plans. All right, here's this project. Where does it stand? What's coming up? Here's this thing. Where does it stand? What's coming up? So you're able to kind of head off a lot of other conversations that may go on because you are taking the time to talk. Did you always do that meeting, or was that something you added later on?
I
I'm
didn't
trying to
always
remember.
Yeah, I didn't always do it. I think in the very beginning I didn't. And then it was very similar. Like I was like, oh, it's very annoying. Like even just once a month is often too little.
Yeah.
Because I find just things get again, then people get nervous, like, is my stuff getting done or where is it? But just having that bi-weekly meeting and then the daily check-in through Voxer or Slack kind of alleviates all of that, and it helps you build trust over time, especially that they know like if you've given them something, it's happening. I think it was something I learned, but I definitely think it's important.
Yeah. I've had a lot of clients who have different kind of businesses, like maybe they're like a marketing strategist or something like that. And we've implemented that kind of system because they didn't have regular meetings. And then, yeah, it's hard. And then you're trying to track down clients to get approvals for things or talk about things, or then they've got something. And so yeah, there's a lot of last minute and ad hoc communication where a regular meeting can kind of take care of a lot of it. And I think it allows you to be a lot more strategic because you're able to kind of put some thought into, all right, we're going to talk, here are all the things that we're going to talk about, so you can be a lot more strategic and thoughtful about all the things. So yeah, regular communication. We've talked about really looking at who the client is in the beginning, like making sure that you're taking on clients that align with you in the first place. It's going to help. Having clear proposal and scope of work. And then within the onboarding, all of the communication expectations. So this is how we're going to communicate. This is when I'm available. This is our turnaround times. This is how, when I'm going to respond to you, like all of those kind of specifics. And then just not being afraid to over communicate, like just to kind of be repetitive with your communications and making sure that the client knows, all the what's going on, when things are going to happen, just kind of all the bits around that, being transparent. And I think in regular communication. Is there anything else that you think anything else that we didn't touch on that you think would be important?
I would just say the only thing is maybe just to focus on out of scope or in scope. Just be very careful with that because again, that can build tension in the relationship if you find yourself doing things that you're like, this isn't what I signed up for. And maybe the client doesn't know that. It's often they don't even realize that they're asking for something out of scope. So again, a very clear proposal kind of helps avoid all of that. And if something is out of scope, communicating it immediately in a very professional and kind way, just saying this is out of our current scope, but I can send you a quick estimate of what it would be to add it. So just kind of being very open with that.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And, and I've had clients who have had that situation, and whether they decide to take it on for additional pay or whether to go ahead and include it, I always think it's important to point that out so that you continue to just confirm the boundaries and the scope of what you're doing. So, yeah, this is out of scope, but I'm gonna take care of this for you right now. Yeah. Awesome. All right. Thank you for the conversation and your time. And I appreciate this. This is also going to be a blog post over on the website. So if someone wants to read a little bit more about it. And we're also going to have Holly's website linked here too. So if you want to learn more about Holly, you can check out her website, Anchor Administration.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Holly. And don't forget to like and subscribe so that you don't miss any of the videos.